with Jonathan Lafley, known for...
Oh, I get to say my stuff. I do Critical Go Westerly and Queso, which is a bunch of indie stuff. So I think I'm the guy with the most weird kind of, you take a bottle of water and you fill it, weird indie mechanic stuff.
that clears everything up.
Yes, with a bottle of water.
Yes, screw the microphone. I haven't used my voice all day. I'll just speak loudly.
Local alchemist.
So speaking of glasses being half full and half empty.
No water-based games for us.
Marco.
A number of years ago, I wrote a book called 40 Years of Gen Con, which was the history of gaming's, tabletop gaming's biggest convention, the convention that spawned Dungeons & Dragons, and therefore most of tabletop gaming, except for wargaming, which of course preceded it. And one of the things that I learned in doing that is that through its 40 now, close to 45 years of continual upward growth, everyone has always thought that the game industry is dying. We had, for example, some
It's
of you.
not.
It's not. And this year, it's even harder to maintain the illusion that the form of entertainment that we love is dying, because there's this incredible explosion of creativity and incredible new games coming out, and a lot of that is to do with the Kickstarter revolution. We won't talk too much about Kickstarter unless you ask us to, but that has changed a lot of things for gaming, in that people who have been doing this for a while and who have built up their names are now able to go to their audience, not just with the things that they're known for, but for crazy new things, and get really great support to not only get the rest of the funds they need to finance a print run, but can significantly make what they're doing even more awesome than they originally planned it to be. And this sort of rectifies a huge structural problem that we've had for many years, which is that the traditional way of getting games into people's hands through the three-tier publisher, distributor, retailer model has not been actually meeting the demand that existed. And what Kickstarter established is there's actually a huge number of people out there who want exciting new role-playing stuff and board game stuff. And there's certainly no doubt that that was doing well, because we've got a whole board game revolution going independently of what's going on in role-playing. But for once, at a State of the Industry panel, there will be no complaining, because there's really very little to complain about, except, I guess, the threatened dangers of success.
It's true. So the Gen Con, the convention that we just came from, has been increasing in attendance every year. And some people, there's a faction of the industry who uses Gen Con as the overall industry success metric. And not only did Gen Con break attendance records last year, we ended up with 49,000 unique visitors. It broke its record by a record-breaking percentage. Went from 42,000 last year to 49,000 this year, which in my 15 years of Gen Con is crazy and awesome. It was like the dealer's room down there here at this show, writ large.
In fact, talking about that, most of the people I talk to, what happens is that usually you get a lot of people when you demo or run things through, and then on Thursday they're just running through the hall because they want to see everything. But even on Thursday, there was a higher conversion rate from demos to sales on like every single day of the convention. Then the usual thing is that people will spend the Thursday and Friday getting either the exclusives or then shopping around to see what they like, and then purchasing most on Saturday and Sunday. For pretty much every single retailer I talked to, every single publisher, it was every day has been phenomenal, and we've been selling more because people are buying more.
And that's because, as Robin alluded, the three-tier system, the old way of doing things, has broken down significantly for major segments of the market. And it used to be that publishers would sell entirely to distributors and then forget about it. And there was no direct sales component, or if there was, it was very minor, it was just at conventions. And the distributors took all of the risk and did all of the work. They're still taking a bunch of risk, but they've stopped doing the work for a lot of market segments. So what happened was, you have a built-up demand for these games that was not being met by the retail store, because the retail store couldn't get the thing in stock. They didn't know it was in stock because the distributor wasn't doing the part that involves, moving product. down the chain to the retailers. And between that general collapse of the distribution tier, which basically happened when card games became so much more profitable to stock than any other thing in the industry, that it sort of blew out all of the systems that stocked everything else. You had that combined with the internet, which allowed everyone who plays anything to find all the people who play that and get themselves excited about it and build up audiences and build up local conventions where everyone could say, yeah, we're gonna go and we're gonna meet there and we're gonna play Chaos in the Old World because it's awesome. Or we're gonna go meet there and play Hero Quest because it's awesome. Games that they might not have found out about or known about, they can build those out and they become pull markets again, and people build demand for it. So when they get to Gen Con, it's not a matter of I'm going to go look at everything and see what I like. It's I've come here because I've got a list of products that, generally because the distribution system is broken, I haven't been able to get at my house. I haven't been able to get it from my game store. Maybe I don't have a game store because they all went out of business in 2008. Whatever it is, they haven't been able to get it. But they come to Gen Con knowing what they want and knowing about games. And since we are producing, I think by and large, better games than we ever have as a segment, people are more excited to play them. So the demand is there, and the demand feeds on itself because once you've bought 3 role-playing games, it's like anything else. Now it's my hobby. Now I'm a collector. Now I want more because I'm playing with people who maybe play other board games or play other card games, and they tell me about stuff. And that's how it builds. And that building, we are now past the trough where the destruction of the distribution segment and the dieback of the retail segment could hurt us, and we're coming up the other side of that trough. And we're getting to the part where the internet's communities have been building demand and have been building product knowledge. So that's why you get people buying every day at Gen Con, because they came there with a shopping list.
Right, we're also benefiting from the general nerdification of pop culture. That nerd culture, as you can see here, is a mainstream culture now, and people who are getting together because they like anime or cosplay or any of the other different tracks that you see here at Fan Expo can also be exposed to, the people with Boffer swords, and they can poke their heads in the door and see games being played. And it's never been easier to find out about tabletop. It used to be you needed retailers in order to create a community for players to get together and meet and find gaming groups and so forth. Well, now that we're in the advanced stage of the internet, communities sort of form spontaneously. Now we even have people who go onto Kickstarter looking for cool games to support, find whatever's up there, support it, and that's how they join new gaming communities. And so, and that's something that's really surprising and an unexpected benefit of that. And so what we're seeing, and you're also able to see people do really cool things because the economics of selling a larger proportion of your product at 100% price as a publisher, as opposed to the 40% that you would normally get when you go through the 3-tier system, makes a big difference. And so you can actually make a much smaller print run profitable, meaning that you can do cool things that appeal to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4,000 people of great taste and discernment, and be rewarded for it. And that's a huge additional benefit if you're doing things that are experimental or have a niche quality to them.
Now, on top of that too, we're also benefiting from the rise of casual games, casual video games, right? It's not just a case of, last year when we talked, we brought that up, I kept thinking about that line that the most important game ever done in the past decade could easily be said to be Farmville. Because what it did is it introduced people, again, this is all him, this is not me, this is his, I give him credit.
Or blame.
Yeah. But I think it is because it's introduced people to a lot of game terms, to a wider group of people faster, and that so that you can go to someone and say level, they go, I know what you're talking about. Experience, I know what you're talking about. To a group of people that would never have approached that or had the way to understand that. And so that translates into, not everyone, but if 10 million people are playing Farmville, then that's if it comes down to people who go, hey, what other games are there? Hey, board games, hey, role-playing, and it trickles down everywhere because there's this massive amount of access and free access, right? Because people may complain about the free to play, about the in-app purchase, the freemium model. But what it does is it still gets people into the door to trial these games that they wouldn't have even thought about trying before.
There's also the what I love to call the Pokemon effect that is just starting to bear fruit in the last few years. So Pokemon was out more than 10 years ago, which is scary, still scary for me to think about. I have adult friends that I work with that grew up on Pokemon, and back in 2000.
Now, Pikachu himself is in grad school now.
That's a true fact. True fact. So like I think it was 2001, I believe, maybe even 2000, when Wizards of the Coast was sold to Hasbro, and it was before that. Anyway, as long as that it sold to Hasbro, and Pokemon was the #1 selling TCG in North America by far. It was the #1 selling anything by far, and the goal that Wizards of the Coast had back then, the reason why they acquired Pokemon was to convert a new generation of potential gamers into gamers. They actually wanted to create a breeding ground of Magic players. And we're starting to see, obviously they did not convert all of them, but there are a lot more people who game now that if you talk to them here at Fan Expo that grew up on Pokemon, probably still play.
And I guess the final sort of piece of the puzzle is that between the internet making it easier to build communities and the sort of the maker culture making it more interesting to have hand-built, homebrew, artisanal, whatever you want to call it, whatever, we are getting into a ongoing golden age of game design that in role-playing at least has been going on for 11 years and is showing no sign of slowing down. And not just the people who are the new punks on the block who came in 2002, came in right after sort of the World Wide Web really blew up, but even old salts like Robin or myself, Rob Heinzo and Jonathan Tweed just put together a new fantasy game, and these are the old traddest of trad guys, and they're still doing cutting edge, terrific work. So you're seeing, on the one hand, increased desire to play and increased demand and increased nerdification on all levels, but on the other hand, you're also seeing more great stuff for them to play and more different varieties of great stuff. And supply does not create demand, but it certainly doesn't hurt.
I mean, also leading to that, and we're getting the rise of designer games.
Yeah.
Right, like particularly in role playing, where I mean that's not a new thing, but it's kind of new a little bit in role playing. Where before it was like I'm following this product line, and now a lot of people, at least back to the Kickstarter thing, where people are like I'm following this designer.
Yeah.
Usually named Monty Cook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Often certainly named Monty Cook. And that is that's a spillover from I think a lot of it is the internet, but a lot of it just happens in art form after art form after art form. And no one cared who wrote plays until William Shakespeare made people put his name on stuff and take his name off stuff that he didn't write. No one cared who made films until Cahiers du Cinema made the auteur cult a thing, and people started listening to directors. No one cared who wrote a comic book until Alan Moore and Frank Miller, between them, sort of insisted that everyone should know that Alan Moore and Frank Miller did this awesome thing. And role-playing games have, and game design in general, has begun to sort of follow in that every art form trend, that you get to a certain point and people start following creators as opposed to studios. No one sits there and says, gosh, I wonder what Island Records is going to release. But they all, they have a band, they want to know what Arcade Fire is going to release or whatever.
So at this point, I guess we can turn it around to questions from the audience. So what do you want to know about the tabletop game biz?
I can throw a couple video game questions back. I have done some work there.
Oh, we already
We kicked those people
We
out.
excised that.
No,
Clearly, but in case someone didn't get the memo.
Yeah, let's talk to Jonathan after the panel.
And while you're thinking of your first question, there's one more thing. The other really wonderful thing is that we are getting much more women involved in tabletop gaming, and as the people in nerdly pursuits more and more look like the general population, that includes women. And if we reach gender parity, that doubles our audience right there, and has all sorts of other wonderful knock-on effects too.
So, questions?
I got a question for the panel.
The gentleman in the green shirt.
Hello, my name's Eric. Hello. Where do you guys see the industry going in the next 3-5 years? What do you see as general trends, and surprises, et cetera, et cetera?
Is that a question you hate?
It is the question I hate, that's why I'm asking.
Okay, sure.
I see bigger integration of tabletop and apps. It's going to be a huge thing. I think we're going to continue to see more exciting work done in stuff that comes out of Kickstarter as people get better at doing it and learn the math of what their margins are. And so we'll see perhaps smaller, more modest projects, but the ones that get the margins done better. So you'll see less of these sort of huge, nut grossing Kickstarters that don't actually turn a profit for their people who launch them.
I think you're going to see an acceleration of the trend that's already begun in the last decade or so of more regional game conventions. Your individual province, your city, your metropolitan area, there's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 game conventions. And those conventions are going to be sustained by, things like the Board Game Geek website or your meetup group, whatever it is. And because those are really the test beds for gaming now that the retail sector has had to retrench in a lot of places. And the regional convention is a great way for the gaming hobby to stay current with whatever people want to play, because unlike a store, it doesn't cost them anything to retrench. The next year, it's all miniatures. The next year, it's all card games. The next year, it's all role-playing. They don't just have to print a program, and they can be more flexible, and they can respond to a local audience, and you can see sort of that effect beginning already with things like the Pacific Cons out in, well, obviously the Pacific Coast, and the double exposure shows in New Jersey that are just blowing up. I think that we're going to see more and more and more of those, and those are going to become more and more important for designers to sort of pay attention to and say, oh, it looks like everyone in the Southeast is suddenly interested in, app-driven war games or app-driven robot fights or whatever, and then we'll start chasing those audiences as they become tastemakers, and as the more and more power keeps shifting to the consumer, like it has in every other field. I think we're going to start looking at where the consumers are gathering so that we can see them.
And pursuant to that, we're going to see the snakes and latte model take over the world. Snakes and lattes is actually in my neighborhood, and when it first went in, I thought, oh, what a beautiful idea. They're going to be out of business in 3 months. And now, of course, they're going strong. They had to double their size, and they're a huge component of the local scene here and a real linchpin of the community and part of the big strength of that. And now there are other game cafes opening in Toronto, and you're going to see more of that. And in 5 years, it's going to be weird to have a town with any number of knowledge workers or college students or young people that doesn't have a game cafe.
3D printing. Not now, because if they're still not at a high enough resolution. Give it 5 years. You said 3 to 5 years. 5 years, you're going to see maybe even a little longer, depending on patents or whatever's expiring or whatever time. But you're going to see an explosion in people who can produce not only everything they need for a game, but specific pieces or individual pieces, or like collector pieces. Oh, you want this to look like this? Okay, we can set this up for you. As part of that. Now, because we look at companies that are doing particularly well, one of the things they have is a high production value. Again, my favorite example is FanExpo. Like, their games are $100 each, but you don't feel like I paid $100 and didn't get my money's worth. You're like, you spend the time looking at the models and being like, okay, this is awesome, and everything you get is just high quality. And so the more that gets down and the cheaper that gets down to all the other producers, then you see that kind of level rise. I think this is.
And weirdly, you're going to see the resurgence of brick and mortar retail as a positive benefit of the death of brick and mortar retail, because it is the death of the old system that has allowed this incredible resurgence and demand for things to manifest itself. And now there's going to be enough money and demand for it for retailers to start opening up again. And in fact, can you notice that at GTS, which is the Gamma trade show, the big industry-only trade show that's in Vegas in the spring, that there was a huge number of new retailers jumping back in?
There were. Yeah, it's and I saw virtually all of them because we were at the Oscar booth and we had a new product line that was retail specific. So everyone came by. It was a bigger percentage of new attendees at the show than has happened for some time. And obviously there's many a slip, but you can't have a retail sector without new retailers coming in. And if they can stay on a good footing and they can learn from everyone else's mistakes and they can build community the way that Snakes and Lattes has and the way that other good retailers have, Endgame in Oakland, obviously, Modern Myths in Connecticut and New York, you're going to be able, Massachusetts and New York, you're going to be able to build out sort of, from best of breed, people be able to go online and read retailer blogs, and Gary Ray at Black Diamond is going to be blogs about everything that goes wrong in the store all the time. Just start doing that, and you can avoid so many mistakes just by knowing what you're doing. And I think that the retail sector is poised to potentially be really strong. I mean, obviously there's questions about the larger economy and employment, but those are going to affect everybody.
One more. Sorry, if I could just pop in one more thing for that. Open source. Because you have Fate, which is Creative Commons. Robin is Gumshoe.
Both Drama System and Gumshoe will shortly be available in open licenses. And
Yeah.
You can pick which one, whether you want to do an OGL version or a Creative Commons version.
Right, so there's that. I mean, all the stuff I've ever done has always been Creative Commons license, the apocalypse world. So you're seeing more and more systems being made available for more and more people to create. So what you're going to do is you're going to find a lot of different people picking the system they think will fit what they're trying to do and using that. So you're going to see, I think, a better kind of boom than the D20 boom, because the D20 bubble kind of was like the OGL, and it was the first, everyone did stuff, and then there was so much of just that one product that it fell down. Now it's going to be more like tendrils, where there's a whole pile of, there's all the people who want to do a fake game, and people who want to do a Apocalypse World game, or like basically there's going to be more selection, so there's less riding on one system.
And again, the collapse of the distribution tier means you can't over-order that. Let's take some questions that aren't from Eric.
If you were to, I want to make a game, but of course I don't know much code. I want to take the business aspect of it and gather everyone together, the coders, the designers, etc. So as someone who wants to emerge as an entrepreneur in that sense, what are the steps that I should take?
Do all the business school stuff, get your business plan together. What you're saying is, I want to start a business.
Yeah.
How do I start a business? Read the places that you go to start a business and do that. Get a business plan together. Do all that kind of stuff.
Go to a business convention.
Yes.
We don't know anything about coders because we're tabletop, not computer games.
See, I told you there was something to know. So what you're looking at then is that, again, it's like the same thing. You have to bring people in, you're going to have to pay them, right? If you don't want to do it yourself. Though there are many things that allow you to do it yourself if you don't have a huge coding background. So there's a whole slew of tools for that. But if you, like I said, that's a business question. That's how do I start a business? Well, you start a business, the way you start a business is, oh, I need a coder, you hire a coder. What coding you want to use? Well, that's what you do your research for. We can't tell you, or no one here can tell you exactly what you need to do, because you need to figure out what you want to do exactly, and then find the stuff that will do that. But then that's going to a business convention.
Yeah, the exercise of writing a business plan and trying to get a bank officer to look at it without laughing is going to do so much more research for you than anything else that you can do. So once you've gotten to that stage, that's going to be the point, and that literally is the process by which you'll find out everything else you need to do, because that's what a business plan is for.
And if you go to the bookstore and go to the business section, there's any number of really great books on writing business plans, starting your own business, the beginning of entrepreneurialism. And this is where most people in gaming who flame out fail spectacularly, is because they have a really exciting creative idea, but they haven't yet done the basic homework required to run a business. And in the case of a computer app, one that's going to require a solid budget. So do all of those steps, and then find a mentor who is doing something very similar to what you're doing, and find a way to non-knowingly ingratiate yourself to that person. And perhaps, and in whatever capacity that you see yourself in the business that you're starting, you might try and get some sort of internship or entry-level position in another company that's doing that, so that you can see it from the inside. So that, and if you do all these things, you'll be way ahead of a lot of people who start just with the cool idea and don't do the basics of what is a very tricky series of business hoops that you need to jump through.
You guys seen anyone be successful after Kickstart, where they would actually not necessarily go to the mainstream publications, but actually want to run their business off of a website? Like, has anyone kind of maintained that level of momentum and actually made a career out of selling it themselves or doing it small? And
It's too early. We're really only getting to the point where the first wave of big Kickstarter games was actually shipping.
But yes, there are successful, self-supported, independent game designers, some of whom began before Kickstarter. Luke Crane, who now works for Kickstarter, hilariously. But he built Burning Wheel Enterprises up basically on a punishing cycle of demos and producing superb games. Vincent Baker, a lot of the sort of Western Massachusetts gaming mafia. I don't know if they all, live on a big commune and gather mushrooms together or how it works, but they seem to be able to keep on keeping on. There's other independent game designers who have been able to translate independent success into owning their own property and selling it successfully. And Kickstarter is only making that more and more possible. Monty Cook, of course, is the standout example. I think there's no one on this panel who's going to bet against Monty being able to turn nearly $1 million Kickstarter into a successful game business going down, because he's already built one successful game business without Kickstarter. So I mean, this is like giving Superman not just heat vision but magic. I mean, there's no stopping him now.
Right, and a lot of the companies who do interesting stuff that you like are already very small, right? That they are shoestring operations. Pellegrin, Ken and I do a lot of work with. There are 2 staff members, and everybody else is a sort of a freelancer somewhere else in the world.
I mean, there's like, what, maybe 5 companies, like role-playing, not for example, like at most, you could stretch to say aren't really small, shoestringy.
And even in board games, there's not a lot of giant board game companies after you get outside, Hasbro and Parker Brothers, right? There's
There's Fantasy Flight, they're pretty big.
yeah, but I mean, even then, I mean, Fantasy Flight is still, if we were in a different business, Fantasy Flight, has got what, maybe 80 employees now, something like that.
Well, about 100 something.
100, yeah. So that's getting to be respectable, but no one in say finance thinks that's a big business.
Right.
Virtually every company in adventure gaming is smaller than Fantasy Flight, because Fantasy Flight is obviously building on a huge string of successes, most of them involving asking Eric Lang to design them again, I think.
Well, actually, Cool Mini or Not is a perfect success story for Kickstarter. One of the biggest misconceptions about that company is that they were big already before Kickstarter. They were tiny. They were a website. They're a website where people went into to rate miniatures, and they started getting into board games and launched their board games on Kickstarter and spent a whole bunch. They spent all of their energy on building an audience and getting reach, and they've now done 5 Kickstarters over $250,000. That was pretty much from very, very close to nothing.
Yeah. If you got good games, it's never been easier to actually not lose your shirt building them. I mean, you can still do it, but there's a lot more soft corners than there were when Robin and I started out.
I'm just wondering what you guys think about piracy in the RPG section. More accurately, how Wizards of the Coast is pushing D&D next, mostly because most of the 4E books have been pirated online. Do you see piracy as a very big detriment to the RPG industry? Would be the death of it?
Well, nothing's going to be the death of it necessarily, and I mean, if piracy kills RPGs, it'll have killed all print, digital, and film media before that. Piracy is a fact of life, and there are competing studies that say piracy actually costs a measurable percentage of a creative output, and there's studies that say piracy is entirely orthogonal to the income of a creative, because the people who pirate are pirating for other reasons than people who buy, and those weren't customers ever. It's like the existence of some if there's 100 million people in China that can't read English, they not buying my game doesn't hurt me one way or the other, even if they all pirate it. So the chance that if society breaks down to such a level that no one believes anyone has ever owed money for their work, we're going to have much bigger problems than, oh no, my game business doesn't work anymore. I look at it as just a fact of life. Yes, I'd rather people buy from me because I want money and my cat needs to eat, but I don't think I can go out and, slap people and make them stop doing it. So my job is just to make games people want to pay for and hope that society doesn't collapse while I'm still alive.
And that's
Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
and to mention Kickstarter yet again, that's an opportunity for the people who do have money and do want these things to continue to exist to sort of step into the breach and kind of take over for the people who previous generations would be 14-year-olds who would scrape together their pocket change to buy an adventure. Well, now, yeah, they're probably pirating stuff, but when they become adults and responsible adults, one thing about game stuff, even stuff that's available in electronic form, is if people really like it, they want the physical version of it. And you can't yet pirate the book version of all these things, and they want to come to shows and meet you and have stuff signed, and that I think goes a long way toward helping with that. And if it even converts a fraction of those people, mostly in other parts of the world, as Ken suggested, who are downloading stuff illicitly into future older gamers, eventually there's a point where it's just easier to buy the stuff that you want than it is to bother pirating it.
A fan base is a fan base.
The other thing too is, Fred has tweeted out a couple of really interesting things that came up. The first one was after the Kickstarter, really successful fake core Kickstarter, they put the PDF as pay what you want, and the first review they got was, "I'm sorry, I paid $10 for this. I meant to pay $15." And the second one they got was, "Downloaded the PDF for free. Now I'm going to buy the book."
Yeah, Paizo, when they released Pathfinder, they did a year-long playtest for anyone who wanted to sign up, and they got all the design files, and then they got the beta. They got the actual contents of the Pathfinder core book. And so everyone literally in the world who was interested in Pathfinder got it for free from the company with no morals obloquy, no need to raise the black flag or go through a Ukrainian website of dubious legality. And they sold 50,000 copies in the first year. So people like buying things that they want to use. And I think people in our hobby, because it is fundamentally a social hobby, maybe like that a little more than people who are misanthropes sitting in the basement listening to, whatever.
And also, there's just the fact that the amount of time that you could spend worrying about piracy is time that you can't really do much about it. You do still need piracy to be illegal, so that when someone puts something up on their site and tries to make money for it, that you can send out a takedown notice. I'm not saying that you don't try to do anything about it, but beyond that minimal level of trying to thwart for-profit piracy, which is easier to do since you need to have a front end and a way of collecting money,
Right,
and
yeah.
therefore can be targeted. The amount of time that I could spend worrying about people in Bulgaria having the newest version of exoterrorists on their hands versus me spending that time writing another new product, one thing is productive and the other is just stressful. If people, I don't like hearing from people that they pirated my stuff. Often they'll say, I started out pirating and then I bought it. It's like, okay, that's cool, but, and there have been cases of people coming up to designers at conventions with their printouts of things that they pirated and wanting them to be signed, and I would advise against that. But other than that, it's let's make cool things for the people who do want to reward us for it.
Another question.
How does an indie tabletop game succeed in the market?
Traditionally by being really good. And that seems like a tautology, but it's not. If you look at, certainly the indie sector, like you asked, and I know this is true in role-playing, and I suspect it's true in board games, and it's probably also true in card games. If you look at the top 10 sellers in indie role-playing, they're all good games. There is no legacy effect because, it's not like, oh, I really like that game when I've never heard of it. People bought Fiasco because it's an amazing game that plays really well. People bought Dungeon World because it's a really great emulator for that old school feel with an indie flavor on it. People bought Burning Wheel because it's just a phenomenal way to sort of grind out story and have a huge amount of drama on the way to do it. All of those games are good. There is no undeserved success, as far as I know, in indie role-playing design. And I suspect Eric can tell me if there's indie board games that are selling undeservedly, but I suspect that's not true.
They're all awesome. We actually, about 5
And
years
it just
ago-
sounds like, a lot of just soft soap, but literally I don't get a nickel one way or the other, so,
Well, there are sectors where terrible games do very well. Farmville, for
Yeah,
example. Insofar as it's not actually a game.
but again, no one would classify that as indie. I mean,
No.
there are products that are produced in order to meet a corporate deadline or a corporate timetable, and even though the people involved may or may not be really good designers, sometimes, corners have to be cut or decisions are made outside their pay grade, and they have to, sort of roll with those punches. But an individual designer producing an individual game, there may be good games that are overlooked, but no one ever bought Fiasco because they were made to, or because they felt a lot of pressure to buy the next Jason Morningstar game. And if they felt that pressure, it's because everything Jason Morningstar has ever done has been great.
And one quality that all of those successful games have is that they can be quickly summed up in an understandable single sentence of what you do in this game and why it is fun. So that's the formula that you want to hit, is something that you can give a really great booth pitch to, or on your Kickstarter video, explain really readily what this is in a way that makes the person go, oh yeah, that's what I want. That fills this need. And you can build out from there as to what your, if you're talking to someone who's interested in that, and go into details of what it does. But, back in days when our schedules were slacker, Ken and I would go around Gen Con.
And back when Gen Con was smaller.
Yeah, back when Gen Con was smaller. There was one year when, were you here for this? It was like Jonathan Tweed and Peter Atkinson and I all had time to go around to every booth and ask them what the new cool thing was.
Mhm.
I can't imagine what ancient time in history that was. And you would find very rapidly, you could tell which ones were going to go on to be big cool things. And a whole lot of games, people were like, well, this is kind of like this or like that, that they had really weak explanations of what it was, or they would open up the book and say, well, here's this page of tables. That's the very first thing that they would tell you. So in order to design a really interesting game that will grab people's attention and have the potential of rising to the top along with the Fiascos and the Dungeon Worlds, make sure that it has really clear core activity that you can sum up in one sentence. It makes people want to play your game.
And that's not just for marketing, that's for design.
Yes.
If you've said to yourself, this is a game about giant robots punching each other, you now know that your game, and by God, better deliver giant robots punching each other, but that on the other hand, there probably don't need to be a lot of encumbrance rules, right? You can take things out of your game that aren't giant robots punching each other, and when you say, this is the giant robot punching each other game of all time, you have designed that game, because you designed that game only to be about that thing that you just said it was. And maybe you're designing a game with a slightly broader remit, but you still have ruled out all the other things you didn't need the game to be about. Not every game is GURPS, not every game is Hero System, not even every game is original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, for God's sake.
Actually, to that one, my favorite comment with Brennan and Jason talk about all the time is that for Indie Press Revolution is one of the bigger kind of collector sites for a lot of independent games. And the most common application they got was always, this is how I fix D&D.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Which is, you don't, because, one,
Except Pathfinder.
Right. Or if you were Jonathan.
That was rescue, not fix.
Yeah.
But the thing is there is that, actually Matt McFarland talked about this, like, so there are how many thousands of people who enjoy and play this game, and what you're saying is, these people are all stupid, and you are smarter than they are, and you have this thing that'll fix it. The problem is that they're not interested in that, they're just playing what they're already playing now, and you're not really doing this is an awesome fantasy game of awesome, or like old school feel of old school fantasy kind of grinding out like Dungeon World. It's what everyone else has done, but slightly, it doesn't grab, it's not grabbing.
Yeah, I mean, if you start, you say, Traveler, I have much better spaceship rules. It's like, you've already got me thinking about a game I already like.
Right.
That isn't yours.
We actually did a seminar like I was going to say 5 years, but it's actually 10 years ago. When this was, I believe, at the Gamma Trade Show, which is where all the industry of the retailers, distributors, and publishers get together and have seminars about how to improve the industry, etc. But there was a guy from Chaosium named Eric Rowe. You guys probably remember him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Speaking of going to business school.
Yes.
Yes, well,
Eric always knew what he was doing wrong.
Right. But I mean, he summed up very
Didn't
well.
have a way out of it. very Fargo.
Just make sure if you want to succeed, set yourself on a path to success in the industry. Make sure your product is unique and compelling. Unique is something that you can research. You can just look at everything else in the market, make sure that your idea actually is unique in some way, some non-trivial way. Doesn't mean you have to completely reinvent the wheel, reinvent a new type of gaming, but just something that hasn't been done almost exactly like that before. Compelling is noetic. I mean, you play this with a couple of game groups, and instantly you'll be able to tell whether they're interested or not. The premise I use when I'm playtesting games, when I'm putting together my own prototypes, is I never ever ask my playtest groups. I always ask them to come to my house and play games, but I never ever build a schedule. I never tell them what to play. I just say, we're going to come to my house, we're going to game, and I let them decide what the schedule is. What do they want to play? That's how I know which one of my games, for example, are the ones that I'm going to work on, the ones that other people are interested in coming back to me for. The rest of them I just don't bother.
And that's a restatement of the basic rule of making anything in order to sell it, which is have a unique selling point. The unique part is already in it, and selling point is the compelling part. So, if you're doing something that's a minor variation on something that's already been done, that has already been done. So come up with a new cool thing we haven't done yet. Another question?
Question?
I have a question. I'm just curious if you've ever come across a concept of a game that you thought was too crazy to succeed. Someone pitched you an idea and you just thought that would never work. I'm curious, did it work or were you absolutely right?
Oh yeah. So at Gen Con, I might have actually been with one of these guys. Somebody came up to us we were all at the White Wolf booth, and came up and pitched us an indie RPG that you literally have to be high to play. And the text was written in that fuzzy 3D script that you could not it was awful. It was unique. I'd never seen it before.
For a certain market segment, I'll bet it's compelling.
Exactly right. But so I haven't seen them since that show, and I haven't seen that product anywhere on the shelves. So some ideas just maybe really crazy, but probably shouldn't be made.
I mean, we've all had nightmare pitches, but the thing about hanging out with independent game designers, which I've done off and on for the last decade, is someone will come up and say, I'm going to pitch a werewolf game about your first date. And I would say, well, that seems odd, but I've seen odder, and it might work. Or when Jason Morningstar has just come off doing a gripping tear your guts out game about the Polish resistance in Warsaw in 1944. And he says, I think my next thing is going to be gaming out Coen Brothers movies. You say, well, that's something of a tonal break for you, Jason, but on the other hand, yeah, I don't think there's anything Jason can do. So there are certain designers that could pitch me, they could pitch me Eric's, Get High and Play the Game, and I'd say, well, all right, Luke, but they're probably going to fire you from Kickstarter if you playtest it too much.
A lot of the big sort of noticeable flame ads are things that are built around components, where the role that the component plays in it is not mean that it's a super compelling game. So there was like the pirate ship game that you built from plastic cards and popped them out and building the ships was cool, and then having the ships fight was not cool. Or there was like a game where you had sort of bionicle cybernaut figures that somehow were the resolution system for that. And it's very difficult to get, bunch of guys sitting around a boardroom scenario can say, well, yeah, this will be a great one because I have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on figures in order to play it. But from the point of the gamer, it's like, well, maybe I would just rather spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on more and more game books that are the core thing that I know I already like, and that way psychologically my family members won't quite notice how much I'm spending.
Or if the thing is like we have to build little pirate ships, the trouble is that there's other hobbies where you build more pirate ships and they're better pirate ships. And the same thing with Bionicle guys. I mean, you can spend hundreds and hundreds of money on Bionicle, and you never have to play a single game with it. You just have them run around in your bedroom and go pew pew like I did, with Legos before they had Bionicle. It's like ancient.
For many years, Games Workshop had the best business model and did really well with it, and they because they were not only selling you a game, they were selling you the figures that went with the game. They were selling you two hobbies, the hobby of playing the game and painting the figures, and they would roll over their audience every 3 years and intentionally trying to drive older players out in order to keep the younger, hungrier players in. And the best consultant story I ever heard was about Games Workshop having an outside consultant to come in and analyze their business from the top down. And the business consultants looked at everything that Games Workshop did and came back and presented to the board of Games Workshop. The thing that we've noticed is that your most profitable line is in fact the paints that you sell kids to paint, the miniatures. Your margin is better on those, it's better than on the figures, it's better on the books. Our recommendation is you cancel the figure and game components of your line and only sell paints. Those consultants did not get hired back.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions what would be some good questions to ask after you've been running a game test with some players? Like, what would be some of the key questions you guys ask?
Did you like it?
Do you think you could teach someone else to play it without me standing there?
Were there parts that broke down? Were there parts that were too hard to learn?
What part of the gameplay did you like best? I mean,
I try to avoid yes and no, like direct yes and no answers, but questions that create dialogue. So, what was your favorite part? What was your least favorite part? Where did you have trouble? Where did you have trouble with the game? Where did it behave? What was easy? Where did it behave the way you expect? What wasn't? Although I do find there's a corollary to that, though, that I find that those questions are generally not useful. They're not as useful with an outside group. I would do it with an outside group that you haven't been observing playing. They're most useful, at least for me, when I'm playing with a group and get to observe their body language and while playing the game, and then ask the questions afterwards, because the answers and their in-game experience very, very seldom add up.
Yeah.
Right, because people afterwards can talk themselves out of having had a good time.
Absolutely.
And another thing is that you will get suggestions on how to fix things. Ignore them. They're almost always wrong and more complicated, and because of course the people who want to be helpful and make suggestions, but they'll be taking things from other games and trying to bolt them onto yours, or they'll be trying to fix that one problem in a way that just creates a huge special case rule. So whenever anyone identifies a problem in a game of playtesting, I can almost always go, oh yeah, here's the simple fix that fixes that, and ignore the enormously complicated suggestion that the person is making.
And often a lot of those suggestions come down to, well, your game was not my idea in the following way. You should fix it.
Yeah, and stovepipe your playtesters so that they are not in a community together intellectually arguing themselves toward one or other position, but keep their input uncontaminated by their knowledge of other playtest groups.
Okay, another question? Anybody? No, there we are.
It's just like a random thing. Like, I was thinking of developing my own thing. I don't play that many board games that I did or the idea for what I want to do. What are some good resources for developing things like a card-based game or a board-based game? Like, what are some?
Well, first, you play a lot of other board games.
Yeah.
No, I mean, not like that. Like, what are the actual physical resources? Like, what are some good ways to get your hands on materials? And what are some good things to
Dollar
do
stores?
to avoid?
No, seriously, I'm not kidding. Like, I went to a dollar store, I bought a bunch of small wooden cubes, and all of a sudden I had pieces.
Michael's.
Yeah, Michael's is good. Dollar stores, like craft stores.
And there's some there's plenty of stuff online where people will mock up a prototype for you. I forget what it's called. It's like Create Space or something like that.
Game crafters.
Game crafters.
They're kind of expensive.
Well, yeah, but if you want to design, then that's what you got to do. And
I
better you know it now.
I highly recommend saving that stuff though until you've done a lot of iterative work on your
Yeah,
game.
but iterative work, like you say, is dollar stores get Magic Commons for a nickel a piece, and right on the back or whatever.
Use them to stuff the sleeves
Yeah.
to make the
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, index cards and butcher paper are going to answer 60% of your problems before you ever get to the point of
What's butcher paper?
it's like the big brown paper that you spread out over a picnic table to prevent it from getting potato salad on it. So that's what you're going to be drawing your first 9 or 10 boards on anyway. So don't worry about it. And then you know, once you finally got a board that actually behaves correctly, then that's when you can, you know, go up and get Bristol board or laminated or whatever you want to do. And then, you know, lots of other games have got pieces in them, just loop them. You know, you've got, you don't need paper, you need play money, you know, buy a new set of Monopoly, or you need, you know, pawns or whatever, like, it says go to the dollar store and buy something that's got a bunch of different colored pieces to it.
I say this panel after panel after panel, though, don't spend too much money, especially early on. Like, if you're thinking about making a game, if you're at that step, just use paper and pencil and pennies and whatever. Like, the less you distract yourself from that early in the process, the better it is for you.
And again, the thing is, when you do decide to go to that step, when you've got to buy these pieces, frequently make sure they're multi-purpose, so that you don't have to keep buying new things for everything. You can be like, hey, look, I need certain cubes. Okay, look, well, look at these other certain cubes. Good, I have these in these colors already. Let's, you know, use them across these two. It's like the cheap-ass games model of game design. Make your game and just use the same pieces across various games.
A question over here?
You talked about the breakdown of the three-tier system and the resurgence now of the retailer. How far do you see mainstream big box retailers like Walmart and that cutting into specialty game retailers?
Walmart could never cut into specialty game retailers because they don't have the shelf space, and frankly, we're not yet a big enough market for them. They can cherry pick. Something comes out like Munchkin that suddenly is selling millions and millions and millions of copies. Walmart can stock Munchkin, but even then, the person who buys Munchkin at Walmart is not a gamer. It's a gamer's aunt, or a gamer's friend, or a gamer's, you know, cousin from Iowa, and they're like there, and they say, "Oh, look, Munchkin! I've got a friend who plays that. I should buy some." And maybe they buy it for them. Maybe they buy it for their friend. The gamers buy from game stores. They either buy them from game stores online, or they buy them from game stores in their city, or they buy them at conventions. You know, sort of a big traveling game store.
It's Amazon that's much more
bigger threat.
Bigger threat to small brick and mortar.
Yeah, and that's true again across segments. It's not just our segment. It's, you know, and it's not just bookstores. I mean, you know, ski shops are going out of business because they can't compete with Amazon. So, and they have crazy markup. Not Amazon, the ski shop.
Right, and that's why they're going out of business.
Yeah.
We had a question somewhere back there earlier.
I'm fine.
Okay.
I guess we'll just have to follow up to that. I know this is an off question, but do you see, like for example, a board game only store retailer as something that can survive, or is it something that has to be a little bit broader in that specific niche?
You could probably survive with a board game only store depending on where you had it, but I'm not sure why you would want to unless you have some sort of religious objection to cards. Role-playing games, sadly, are still a fairly small part of the whole adventure gaming hobby. Depending on how you count it, it's between 6 and 10% of the hobby is role-playing games. But board games are you know, huge, and card games are even huger. But cards don't take up a lot of physical space. So I think that it shouldn't be that hard to have both. And your problems of stocking are going to be just as nightmarish because you're still going to have a million SKUs no matter what you're doing.
I mean, most of us industry side have broadened the scope of board games now to mean like board games, single deck card games, even like even games on a board with tons and tons of plastic miniatures. As long as it's not blind purchase collectible in some way, like Magic, Pokemon, or just like 100 million SKUs in a rule book like Warhammer, it's pretty much a board game at this point. If anybody does not, who's interested in the greater board games market, doesn't go to boardgamegeek.com, I would highly, highly recommend it. It's a great resource just to teach you like about the hobby.
Well, when you say card games, the only thing I think of is the collectible card games.
Oh, well, there's lots more.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I count those as board games.
Okay, there you go then. If that's what you meant by board games, I suppose it is possible, depending on your market, to have a store with no collectible card games in it. But again, I'm not sure why you would want to.
Well, I mean, Snakes and Lattes, right? That's a great
Yeah.
example. Like they are a board game cafe. Board game in the scope that I described earlier. It is a cafe, but it's a cafe that's centered around board games, right? You're paying a Starbucks premium on their cafe so to play board games.
So yes, think of diversifying into muffins.
gets. That way you can add like a region.
Okay, but no cronets, do you know?
That way madness and dysentery lies. Anyone have any more questions? Another question perhaps? Yeah.
There are a few shows online about like tabletop games and whatnot, such as like Will Wheaton's Tabletop on YouTube. Do any of you have any plans of going on to any of these shows, maybe playing some games on there or promoting anything?
We're all
I
waiting
plan to
for-
be on all the
Yes,
episodes.
we're all waiting for you to ask it.
Yes, Eric plans to be on every episode of Tabletop in 2015. That's a long-term goal.
The new host.
The new host.
I mean, our plans are our plans are always to be on. Like we all would love to be on that show. It's the process has little to do with the designer at this particular point.
Yeah, and they obviously have to have a mix of types of tabletop games just to keep it various. And the trouble with role-playing games is that they are the least visual and exciting to watch of all tabletop games. So the chances of Robin or I going on before Eric are slim, I think.
Well, I mean, the Fiasco episode was interesting, but then they had to like TV show it up more.
Yeah.
They had to like add the background music and like change the effects so like the show stuff was happening.
Yeah, and the Dragon Age thing, they had the same sort of kayfabe going on with that. So it's very hard to televise a role-playing game. It's been done, but I think it's a niche audience right now. And obviously, Will would like to bring games to a broader audience, not a narrower one, which seems reasonable to me.
Dan Harmon is doing a project where his chosen dungeon master is running D&D games for celebrities, including Kumail Nanjiani and Patton Oswalt, and then they're going to stop motion animate the results. So you hear their soundtrack, but you see stop motion animation.
Yeah.
That's odd.
All right. That's what I mean by niche audience. 3/4 of the table is into that. Of this table, not the world. Now another question. Sure.
You guys ever run workshops for beginner, like independent of these types of big events? Independent workshops, so it's either how to GM or how to design a widget?
The best workshop for designers that I know of, Jeff Tidwell runs one at Gen Con, and will probably run one at another Gen Con unless he wises up. But there's a convention in New Jersey called Metatopia that is a pure game design convention, and you go there, you pay Metatopia a fee, and the organizer finds alpha gamers in the tri-state area who are you select what kind of game you want to play. So if you are saying, I want to do a Hex Encounter war game, but they should be anime fans, he'll find war gamers who are anime fans to play test your game for you.
Vinny will.
Because Vinny will. And that is, as far as I know, probably the closest thing to the sort of thing you're talking about, where you bring your design and you get it workshopped, and some of the workshoppers are alpha gamers, and some of them are fellow designers, and you can get one or both or whatever, and it's between you and Vinny how you want your game to be done. Other conventions sometimes have show your audition your game to the designer. Gen Con had that this year again with Luke Crane, I think, and some other people. What was it called, Tabletop Showdown or something like that. And so there's larger conventions often have that kind of thing. So just check with programming at any convention you happen to be thinking about going to, and definitely think about going to Metatopia, because that's so far the most intense game design experience that I think you can get into on purpose.
On purpose.
I mean, they're also doing something. They're doing the first exposure hall at Gen Con.
Right. Yeah, I should have mentioned that.
Yeah, which is less focused because Vinny has less control over
Right.
who shows up, because but they'll try, and what they'll do is you pay an extra fee for that, but you do get people come in. They had 1,500 tickets. They sold all of them and added 200 extra butts in the seats through generics or just kind of coming in. So they had over about 1,700 playtesters come in.
And more broadly, if any of you are thinking of designing a tabletop game in order to make money on it or even have it sustain itself, you must go to Gen Con. Because you'll learn so much about the industry and how it works, and you'll also meet other people who are like-minded and might be interested in collaborating with you.
And in the board game space, BoardGameGeek.com has a convention called Board Game Geek Con, I think. It's in Texas somewhere.
It is in
And
Dallas, November 20-something.
And does that have like a big trade show aspect to it as well?
It does, actually, it is pretty commercialized now, like most major publishers now have booths there, and it is a tastemaker convention, so it's,
Yeah.
if you have a game and you want to get noticed, I'm actually running, I will be running a workshop there, which we haven't announced yet, so surprise. I'll be workshopping some games at that show.
Yeah, I mean, and even if I would advise going to a show, even if it doesn't have a workshop attached to it, if you are a nascent game designer or an interested in game designer, go to Gen Con, go to Metatopia or DexCon or Dreamation in New Jersey, go to a show that you know that there's going to be other designers at, and, you know, and just talk to the professionals that you aspire to emulate. And most of them are pretty decent people. And certainly once you bought them a drink, they are professionally obligated to be decent for as long as it takes them to drink it. So. We have time for, well, actually, we can talk forever because we're the last panel, but it's been an hour, so you're on your own recognizance. If we have another question, we can make it the last one, and if not, thanks for coming out. So, which is it? You. Ask. You're the guy. Yeah.
Are you pointing at me?
The guy who said, was that you? You said, No. No? You didn't say,
No, I said you guys can go on and talk about whatever you want, some of you guys put this out.
Yeah.
We do it every con. The last one there was one, I wouldn't one that ran on 3.5 hours.
that will not happen.
Oh, no, that was in Fan Expo.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm sensing there was not actually a last question. So that was the last question. That was a good question. Thanks a lot, man. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you, guys.